If you're here, it's probably because of Tyrus Wong's work on Bambi. Until a few years ago, as a Disney geek, I kinda knew who Tyrus was, but the persistence of a little art gallery at Hong Kong Disneyland and Pamela Tong's documentary Tyrus really drilled home the elegance and complex style of this influential artist. There is simply, in the history of Chinese art, Hollywood, and Disney, only one Tyrus. Bambi has a great story and phenomenal character animation, but what sets it apart is Tyrus's vision, a vision which Disney himself immediately embraced once he saw what this lowly in-betweener was capable of. Like Lilo and Stitch many decades later, Bambi is generally remembered for its adorable characters and impressive animation, which overwhelm your average audience member's perception, especially kids' perception, of the transcendent art design, particularly regarding backgrounds and settings. As a 50-something who honestly considers Pinocchio one of my top 5 films, I can't think about either of these movies without thinking of Lilo and Stitch's delicate watercolors, or Bambi's forest, which marries French Impressionism to Song Dynasty landscapes, and that modernist marriage of classic European art with classical Chinese art is exactly what made Tyrus Wong's career. Ironically, he's miscredited on Bambi as a background artist. Tyrus was in fact what's known today as a film production illustrator, the person who gives the movie its style, something evident in his work on Around the World in 80 Days, Rebel Without a Cause, Sands of Iwo Jima, The Wild Bunch, and Annie Mame. In many cases, the final film looks almost exactly as Tyrus envisioned it, and those are all movies you remember as much for their look as for anything else. His definitive biography, Background Artist by Karen Fung, bears that erroneous credit as its somewhat bitter tongue-in-cheek title. Tyrus didn't paint any of the backgrounds in Bambi, but that movie's extraordinary style is 100% because Walt adopted Tyrus's style as the template for his masterpiece. Let's just take a moment to bathe in how that movie looks. Walt and Tyrus were never formally introduced. Tyrus, though an exuberant soul, kept his head down. He skipped out on the first contentious Disney Studios strike to focus on his art. He'd had some success in the literally underground Los Angeles Chinatown art scene, and a few commissions, but a steady job was nothing to sneeze at. He was grateful that his style was seized upon by the studio for their most expensive and ambitious project to date. Writing this, I found myself, like Karen Fung, to whom I owe most of my research, and documentarian Pamela Tong, from whom I borrowed a majority of this footage, calling Wong by his given name, Tyrus. There's just something infectious about this man that makes you feel as if you knew him, and you would have been good friends. Given name. Given by who, though? He was born as Wong Gun Yao, and his immigration paperwork said Luk Tai Yao. Sorry for my awful Cantonese. But for decades, he was known as Tyrus Wong, and when the opportunity came with his American naturalization in 1946 to choose his own name, Tyrus baptized himself. His artistic chop had long included both his own Chinese and Western names. Tyrus was as American as baseball, a sport he loved to play, and as proudly Chinese as the calligraphy that launched his artistic career, thanks to a father who supported Tyrus's art above baseball. Tyrus's father had been a U.S. resident for years in the late 1800s, part of a wave of eagerly encouraged Asian immigration in the wake of slavery's abolition. But by the year his father returned to Guangdong to fetch his son back to California, the American climate had changed. Exclusion laws had made it near impossible for anybody except for the very wealthy to come to America. Tyrus had to pass rigorous interrogations to prove that he was indeed Luk Get's son, which he was. The 9-year-old had to memorize details about his hometown, scratched on a hidden piece of paper which he kept for his whole life, in order to persuade the agents of the Angel Island detention facility to let him enter the country. He was kept away from his father for a whole month, the only child in a crowded prison, full of desperate men who carved sad poetry into the walls and occasionally committed suicide. Against all odds, young Tyrus launched a highly awarded, widely recognized career in the fine arts. Oh, and underpaid, which is what led him to that Hollywood work. Tyrus was not the sort whose work could be put in a box or easily explained. One critic said a particular Tyrus painting was like a Michelangelo with a Chinese twist. I can kind of see that, but what I find amazing is that a Wong painting would look perfectly at home next to a Kandinsky, an O'Keeffe, a Hopper, or a Yuan Hui. A little time spent learning about Tyrus, and you'll wish you would have known him. A constant joker, he published satirical sketches of the Warner Brothers studio brass and other powerful figures in the official studio publications for many years. He designed raunchy murals for the home of Fred Jorger, a fellow Disney alum. He kept a vivacious marriage going with Ruth In Kim for 58 years, a woman whom his friends had warned him was way out of his league, a classy American-born Christian with whom he raised 3 daughters. He spent his last years as an avid kite designer, even starring in documentaries focused on his hobby and headlining magazines about kite flying. He lived until age 106, always in great shape and grinning, even when discussing the darkest parts of his past. Late in his career, Tyrus launched a series of Christmas cards, touted by Hallmark and other titans as artiste greeting cards. They insisted on having his signature on each card, a long way from his time at Disney when his signature was forbidden on concept art, which is funny in retrospect. A signed Tyrus Wong anything would cost thousands at a Van Eaton Gallery auction these days. These cards are gorgeous, fusing Tyrus's ability to suggest much with a few strokes in the Chinese tradition with the now dying art of American Christmas greetings. They harken back to the individually painted menus that Tyrus created for the trendy downtown restaurant Dragon's Den. And it blows my mind that nobody's capitalizing on suckers like me to sell reproductions of these mid-century masterpieces. Pamela Tom's brief documentary is enough for you to fall in love with this irrepressible man. If you're hooked, Karen Fang's background artist offers a deep look at the world that Tyrus came up through. The Exclusion Era, Bohemian Los Angeles in the 1930s, the movie studios, which could either be crushing or familial, the struggles of artists' unions, and the sprawling expansion of LA into the San Fernando Valley. Tyrus is an example of how great America can be, in spite of ourselves. He makes me proud to be Californian, a Disney fan, a lover of Chinese art, and just a human being.